Okay, welcome back to the Rock Your Best Life podcast. With me today, I have Mary Roberts, Keto Mary on Instagram, and she is a ketogenic coach and food addiction and recovery coach. And I'm really excited to talk about all things food addiction and binge eating and all the things. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. I'm so excited to just dig in, but first I wanted you to kind of give us your background, like what led you to do what you do today, and what is your personal story, your health story, and all that.
Okay, well, I'm 49 years old and I have battled a lifelong dysfunctional relationship with food from the time I was a preteen, and then, all through my teenage years, most of my adult life. Um, I, I lived in an alcoholic home. My father was an alcoholic and my mother had her own food issues. And so my view of food was distorted, like, early on. And so I would watch her diet, and then I would kind of like partake in some of those things. And so I ended up in high school overweight and, went on my first diet. I ended up bulimic and being hospitalized for that. And then, after high school, I just continued to battle with, a bulimic mentality and binge eating and compulsive eating and chronic dieting. I tried everything. If there, anything that came out on an infomercial, I was trying it. And I did all the regular things that everybody do, Weight Watchers, Slim Fast, Jenny Craig, Richard Simmons Deal a Meal for those of us that are my age. All kinds of different, programs. And I, was a calorie counting queen, most of my life. I, knew the calorie content of everything. Um, so that was just this lifelong battle. I used food for soothing and comfort and entertainment and reward. And I was just obsessed with food. My life revolved around it. And, I was also obsessed with how my body looked and, trying to lose weight. And so, well, ultimately what happened was, in my 30s, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I had high blood pressure. I was on medication for both those things. I had psoriasis, sleep apnea. I, battled with, fatigue and depression and generally being unwell. I would get sick several times a year. I had asthma. So all these health problems. And so I found myself at age 42 feeling, like I was 62. I just felt older than I was. I was tired. I didn't feel well. I had all these problems. I was on medications. I was obese. I weighed 260 pounds. And I just got, I was just over it. And I had dabbled in low carb a couple times via Atkins. And I attempted to do that a third time because I knew that carbs were my issue. I knew I had a problem with carbohydrates. Um, and so like about a few days after I started Atkins, a friend of mine told me about keto. And so, of course, that changed everything. And I moved forward, doing keto. And it's been over 7 years now. I've reversed my type 2 diabetes. I maintain a A1C of 4.9, which is non-diabetic. Um, I no longer have high blood pressure. It's normal. I'm not on any medications. I don't have asthma and allergy issues anymore. I used an inhaler from the time I was 7 years old until age 42. It was always,
Wow.
in my purse if I needed it. And I realized, several months into being keto, I thought, well, I don't even know where my inhaler is. And I had to, I had to dig for it. I found it buried at the bottom of my purse. I hadn't pulled it out in so long. And
Wow.
so, those were like my first inklings. I'm like, wow, my blood sugar is better. My doctor took me off, the blood pressure medication. I don't need my inhaler. My psoriasis was, starting to clear up. That's the only thing that hasn't gone completely away. I still struggle with it a little bit on my scalp. I don't know why, but it just hasn't gone completely away. I don't snore. I don't have sleep apnea. Like everything that I battled, like went away.
Wow.
So keto definitely turned my health around. But I always want to make it clear because my biggest battle, the health issues, those were, easily reversible by eating the right things. But the bigger struggle was my eating disorder. And so even the first year, even though I was eating all the right things and improving my health, and I had lost, like, the first year I lost like 83 pounds, I
Wow.
still had that like obsession with food. I still woke up every day thinking about food, getting on the scale. And so it occurred to me, like, not quite 1 year and maybe about 10 months into my journey, I realized one day that I was eating when I wasn't hungry. And I was eating, 3 meals a day, two snacks, because I thought, that's what I knew. That's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And so, but about 10 months in, I was like gonna, make a meal, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to eat this. And I
Hmm.
just decided that in there, you know what? I'm not going to eat. I'm only going to eat when I feel hungry. And so then it just turned out that I was only hungry a couple times a day. So I ate twice a day. I was naturally intermittent fasting, which at the time I didn't know that that was a thing.
Hmm.
Um, so, but I later learned that intermittent fasting was a thing. So I just kind of naturally fell into that and felt better. And, but when I stopped eating when I wasn't hungry, I started, the other thing that happened too was that first year, I tried to recreate a lot of like my favorite carbs,
Hmm.
keto pancakes and low carb breads and, all the things.
Hmm.
And there was one thing that I did fairly regularly. It was I made these low carb blueberry muffins, and I ate them every week. I would make them like once a week. And I still lost weight doing this, which, I mean, that's not the point. But
Hmm.
this recipe was like for 6 muffins, and I would eat, and they were 2 carbs each. So of course, my addicted mind was like, okay, 6 times 2, 12 carbs for all the muffins. And so
Yeah.
I would eat all 6 muffins at once. I would make them
Wow.
and I would eat them before they even cooled off. And so then it finally occurred to me one day that this is not normal. And I am still like, I'm tired of this, like, being obsessed with food. So at that point, I started really intentionally working on the mental and emotional aspect of my relationship with food. And one of the things that really saved me was my decision to, when I started keto, my mantra was no cheating. And that was because every diet that I'd ever been on my entire life always ended with a cheat. They always ended like in front of the TV with sweets or in a McDonald's parking lot. Like I would just go on a binge, and then that was the end of it. So when I started this time, I thought I don't want to stay on this roller coaster. I don't want to go up and down with my weight. I want to get this weight off, and I want to feel better. So my thing was no cheating, and that was it was very emotional. Like, I cried a lot over food, junk food. I cried over cheesecake and peanut M&Ms and M's and Hershey bar, like, because I wanted them so badly. But, you know, forcing myself to not have them and think about, like, it made me think about, why do I even want to eat them? They're not going to serve me. They're not going to help me reach my goal. They're going to keep me sick. So why do I want them? And so I just really intentionally started looking at the reasons why I was eating, and, just dealt with that. And there's lots of things, that I had done over the years, but basically, keto was the vehicle. It didn't fix my eating disorder, but it gave me the mental wherewithal and the mental clarity to be able to address my, issues with food and figure out, why I was using food improperly.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, and that makes so much sense. And let's go back a little bit to kind of almost like that grieving process that you had with
Yes.
like stopping those foods and what helped you exactly to be able to do that. Because I
Yeah.
know for me, I have had the same issue with like chocolate. you
Yes.
know,
Mm-hmm.
we eat this really, we can eat this really clean diet and do good like all day. And then
Mm-hmm.
I was finding that I still had to have that, you know, little bit of a little chocolate, but then it turned into more and more,
Right.
each night.
Right.
It's like it still kind of keeps hold of us. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, well,
It's
what helps you with that?
It's part psychological and it's part physical. Like we know that sugar does things, like when we get the taste of sugar in our mouth, it does things to us, right? Physically, like it, affects our brain and we start craving. So, in the beginning when I couldn't have, like it was a combination of sheer willpower and determination and
Mm-hmm.
just being disciplined to avoid it. But when I started to look at why I wanted it and working on like trying to talk myself out of not caving, one of the big things that helped me was, we hear a lot about how we shouldn't, keto's too restrictive and no diet, you should, shouldn't do a diet that's restrictive. And so it, caused me to think about like, the whole restriction thing and being deprived. People love to use that word, oh, don't deprive yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the reality, when I give in to sweets and carbs and all the things that like caused, compelled me to keep eating over the years, all the things that caused my health issues because I didn't have self-control and wasn't a moderator, so it caused me health issues, all the things that caused me to gain weight. The reality is I was being deprived of a quality life. I was being deprived of good health. I was being deprived of peace of mind. And when I quit eating those things, I was not deprived of a Hershey bar. I was not deprived of the cheesecake. And I had to think, okay, what does deprived mean? What does that mean? So I looked at it like, well, that would be something that I didn't get the opportunity to experience. And I looked at my life and I'm like, okay, how many Hershey bars does one person need to eat? How much cheesecake? How I've experienced all these things. I know what they taste like. I know what they did to me. So it's not an accurate description to say if I don't ever eat these things again that I'm depriving myself. I've already had them hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not deprivation. That was one of the, mindset, like one of the paradigm shifts I had to make. And when I looked at it that way, I thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm not deprived. If I eat those things, I'm going to deprive myself of good health,
Yeah.
So the only thing I'm deprived of now is fat pants, right? Like I'm deprived of diabetes. I'm deprived of, bad health. Like, so I don't look at it that way. And I think when
Yeah.
it comes to restriction, and people battle that and talk about how we shouldn't restrict. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with restricting ourselves from something that harms us. Like it is not healthy, it's disordered to do things that we know harm ourselves, that is going to harm us.
Yes, exactly. I agree wholeheartedly with that one. Yeah, and for me, because I have struggled with, alcohol addiction and just I can get addicted to anything really. I feel like,
Yeah.
but I look at it kind of the same way now. But it's hard because in the media and what we're told, oh, everything in moderation,
Yeah.
and all foods fit, and
Yeah.
but like you wouldn't tell an alcoholic, that they can have a little, they
All
can have,
drinks fit.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh yeah.
I think for me that that is the only thing that did help me is like switching that mindset, like you said,
Yeah.
that like
Well,
these things are kind of the same way for me. It's like having, drinking. I can't moderate my drinking, so and I can't moderate my, you know, sweet treats and that kind of stuff. So,
right. Right. Yeah, it's very true. Like this is what food addiction for some reason is becoming more and more controversial. There are people in the keto space that are just deniers. They say food addiction isn't real, and it's so insulting and such a slap in the face to those of us who have battled it. Because if it's not food addiction, then what is it? We're just lazy, undisciplined. We're just, slobs that can't stop. I mean, it's so inconsiderate to say that,
mm-hmm.
and it is a physical addiction and it's an emotional addiction. And so yes, carbs and sugar are a huge problem, but there's some people that will say, oh, all you got to do is stop the carbs and then voila, you're not an addict. That is not how it works. I mean, there are people out there binging on meat and bacon and eggs. They're still emotional eaters. They're eating when they're not hungry. And just
Mm-hmm.
because they're not eating carbs does not mean they're not disordered. And, so that is happening. And the treatment community, the food addiction or the eating disorder treatment community, the failure rate is abysmally high. And that is because they don't acknowledge addiction. They don't acknowledge that it exists. And they say these ridiculous things like, there are no good and bad foods and the all foods fit thing. No, that is not true. There are foods that no human, and I don't even like calling them foods. There are
Yeah.
food-like things,
Yes.
food-like substances that people ingest that we have no business as humans ingesting.
Yeah.
So yes, there are bad foods. If it causes me to feel bad, if
Mm-hmm.
eating things, raises my insulin, raises my blood sugar, causes me to gain weight because I can't control the amount I'm eating, then that is a bad food for me. And so it's this ridiculous notion that there are no bad foods. Like most of what is in the grocery store is terrible. People shouldn't
Yeah.
be eating them. And then the other part, the moderation thing, the treatment community says you'll be well when you can eat one donut and walk away. But like you
Yeah.
said, no one in alcohol and drug rehab is telling people, yeah, you can have one beer on Friday, but just one. If you have more than one, something's wrong with you. You're disordered. You're not well. But
Yeah.
they do that to those of us that struggle with food. And that is why people fail, because they even do this thing it's called fear foods. And like in the treatment centers, they put your fear food in front of you and you need to eat it.
Oh yeah,
Like
I've heard in interviews with people. Yeah, and once I heard that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible."
it is.
They like force people to eat like a donut or a cupcake, right?
It's truly shameful what they do. If I was capable of moderation, I would have never become so sick. I would have become obese. Nobody chooses that. When I was binging, I wasn't like, gosh, I'm so glad I get to do this. No,
Yeah.
I always felt horrible. In the midst of it, it was like shame and regret and pain and guilt and all these terrible things. And I knew like and then the physical feeling and then the coma afterwards, right? Like
Yeah.
nothing about that was good. It was horrible from the first bite to the last bite and then the aftermath. So to say that, food addiction isn't real, as
Hmm.
if that is what I chose and I was just too lazy and undisciplined to do anything else. That's another lie that's put out there by, the fitness and, all these different like, groups. People with
Yeah.
eating disorders have incredible willpower. Like
Yeah.
it takes sheer willpower to stick to a unsustainable diet for months at a time. I had lots of willpower. It's just that what I was trying to do was unsustainable. You cannot live on, a severe caloric deficit and very low fat diets and maintain that. Plus, when your relationship, is all screwed up with food and you eat when you're not hungry and you eat because you're happy, because you're sad, because you're mad, because you're on vacation, because
Hmm.
your boss stressed you out. Like there's all these reasons people eat that have nothing to do with hunger. And the only reason we should eat is if we're hungry. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we can't enjoy our food though. Every time I say that, people are like, take that to mean like, oh, well, food is just fuel. And no, we should like what we eat. I don't advocate eating foods you don't like. You should
Yeah.
eat foods that you like and you should enjoy your meal, but it shouldn't be the center of our universe. Food should be on the back burner of our life.
Yeah, I agree. And part of the problem I think is that most of the foods that most in the standard American diet, most
Mm-hmm.
of them are not filled with the nutrients that we
Right.
need. And then also you have the food industries
Mm-hmm.
that they know that they know about food addiction.
Yeah.
That's how they formulate all the foods that we love, right?
Exactly.
They want us to be
Exactly.
addicted.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And there's whole books, written about that, about how the processed food industry comes up with foods and how they research flavors, and they are purposely trying, they try to make it as palatable as they can, and so that people get addicted and keep buying, and it's all about the money for them. They don't care about our health.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, now how did you get out of the cycle of food addiction? Was it mostly like emotional, mental, or was there part of that changing your diet? Were there things that you added or took away or?
Yeah. So the diet was number one. Getting the sugar and grains out of my life um, is so like keto was the first time that I didn't like track calories, and I was very skeptical. Like I was like, I don't understand how like eating all this fat, but you know what? People say it works, so I'm going to do it. And
Mhm.
so it was the first time in my life that I was on a diet that I did not feel like I was suffering from hunger. Any diet I'd ever been on, I was always like looking at the clock, like when am I going to eat again? I was constantly like playing with my calories and looking at like what can I eat, and all the time I was trying to figure out how, I would look at my calories for the day and I have 300 calories left, and I knew a Snickers bar had 280, so I was
Oh
like,
wow.
oh, I'm gonna have a Snickers bar because and then I'll be done with my calories for the day. But then I needed to use sheer willpower to eat one Snickers bar and not eat anything else for the rest of the day. And that only lasts so long.
Yeah.
We can only do that so long. So the nutrition was key for me. Getting sugar and grains out. I didn't feel like I was on a diet. I felt satisfied for the first time in my life. And for the first time in my life, I experienced feeling not hungry.
Mhm.
Like prior to that, I just felt hungry all the time.
Mhm.
Even when I would stuff myself on a binge, an hour later I could eat again. Like so that was key for me, was getting the nutrition right, feeling satisfied and being nourished. And when I wasn't physically battling, cravings and looking for food, that freed up the brain space for me to start looking inward.
Mhm.
Why am I wanting to eat when I'm not hungry? Why am I thinking right now that I need to have, you know 6 muffins? Like,
Yeah.
what is like, we believe, we do things like that because we believe the food's doing something for us. So
Yeah.
I was still trying to like get soothing and comfort from that sweet taste, even though those blueberry muffins were low carb. They didn't have real sugar, there was no grains in them. It was that, in my mind, it was like, okay, well, this is better than going and getting Costco muffins or Duncan Hines, right? Like, so you justify it. But I wanted to be free from that. Like, why do I even want to eat these? I'm not hungry, I'm just looking for the sweet taste. What do I think it's going to do for me? And so then I just started to realize that, if I was anxious about something, or sad or bored, that I was using food for those reasons. And having
Mhm.
the mental clarity from eating a low carb, high fat diet, it gave me the brain power to be able to address those things. And I did lots of things. I read lots of books. I listened to podcasts, and I had been in and out of like different eating disorder, programs all my life,
Mhm.
from like being hospitalized to, in-house treatment center, to outpatient stuff, to 12-step programs, to group therapy, to like, I did all of that stuff. So, I mean, there were things over the years that I could draw from,
Mhm.
but I wasn't really able to put anything into practice and change my behavior and my view of food until the nutrition was right. Because if you're riddled with, sugar, you're eating sugar and carbs every day, you don't have the mental capacity to be clear on, we're still tied to the food and too emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay,
So
well, let's dive a little bit into like what is let's talk about the differences between like binge eating, food addiction, and then like an eating disorder. How do we know, what's the difference between all those?
So, in general, all of the eating disorders fall under the umbrella of food addiction, right? So, There's, most people don't realize that an eating disorder is their problem. They really do think that they just haven't found the right diet, that they're just not disciplined enough, that they don't have enough willpower. They think it's something wrong with them, the reason they haven't lost the weight and gotten control, because they don't realize that eating disorders aren't just anorexia and bulimia. Like that's what when we say the word eating disorder, that's the first two things people think of: anorexia, bulimia, which of course they're eating disorders. Bulimia, most people think of it as, purge, vomiting up what you eat, but it isn't always that, vomiting. Like there's this bulimic mentality that a lot of people practice, and that is when you make a food decision you feel bad about, you make a bad eating decision, and then you attempt to undo it by heading to the gym and running on the treadmill for an hour, or fasting for like, oh, I just went on a weekend binge, so now I'm going to fast for 3 days, or taking laxatives. And we see it, like when you're on social media, you see people asking questions all the time. They'll be in the keto groups and they'll say, I had a bad weekend, and I'm getting back on track today. What's the quickest way for me to get right back into ketosis? They're looking for shortcuts. They're trying to undo what they did. And that's a bulimic mentality. So it's not just the binging and purging, and then there's binge eating disorder, which a lot of people suffer from. And that was one of I mostly, I had the bulimic mentality, and I was a binge eater and a compulsive eater. So there were plenty of times where I could go all day being good, right? My calorie count would be great. I would be disciplined all day long, but then in the evening, everything would fall apart. And then I would have a huge binge, like thousands of calories at once. That's the binge eating. And then there's compulsive eating. So when I wasn't following any diet and it felt too hard, I would basically get up in the morning and start eating, and I would eat all day. So it's still kind of a binge, but it's like spread out over the day. I'm still eating all of the same food. I'm just not like scarfing it all in at once. So, those are the most common. I think compulsive eating, and that bulimic mentality and binge eating, they are the most common. I think most people struggle with that.
Yeah, I agree. I know. And you touched on, like, seeing it a little bit in social media. It seems like there's a lot of disordered eating out there still.
It's and it's very disordered, like, and that's why people think that these behaviors and things that we do, that it's normal, but it's not normal. It's just common. So many people do it that it's common, but it's not normal to do these things.
Yeah, yeah. And I know I can relate with the binge eating and then fasting and then working out like crazy. I can relate with all that.
Yeah.
Um. So what do you think are some of the common triggers for people? I know kind of what my triggers have been. For me, it has been some, like you said, like having some, being anxious, like before a big event, I would find that I would need to go, and I didn't even know what was like at the time. I didn't know what I was even doing. It was like I wasn't you're not in control, and you find yourself just going to the store and getting all these things, and you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah. There's so many trigger. I mean, it could be people, places, smells. There's, smelling something, like, you go into, like, I used to walk into the local Walmart here, and they always had like the fresh bread, and that smell, like I would be like, oh, I'm buying French bread.
Yes.
Being alone in the car was a trigger for me, because I would go to drive-throughs. Vacation is a trigger for people. Anything like an argument with your spouse, because what we turn to the food because we think the food will make us feel better. We use it for soothing and for comfort. We also use it when we're bored, having nothing to do. Like, food is our entertainment.
Yeah.
Or we've been, or we use it to reward ourselves. We've been good. So it doesn't always have to be like, I think people think that, when they describe themselves as an emotional eater, that it's always got to be a negative. Like I would eat if I was happy. If something good happened, it was like, woohoo, let's celebrate, right? Like
Yeah.
it didn't have to be a bad thing that was going to compel me to eat. It's just, all of the emotions when we, and I think it starts as children. We learn as kids that food is soothing, that food is a
Yeah.
reward. Like look at how many times like maybe you fall and skin your knee and you're crying and grandma or mom is trying to make you feel better. Here, honey, have a cookie. And so
Yeah.
you associate, okay, this cookie's going to fix my pain,
Hmm.
or, what we do the reward thing too. Oh, look, we're going to celebrate your birthday. So have some cake.
Yeah.
There's all these things that are just like ingrained in us that like we should celebrate comfort and reward ourselves with food. And then that's what leads to, and because the food that we typically reward ourselves with is addictive, it leads to all these problems that we end up having. We feel compelled to keep eating. We can't stop. We want to stop. We don't like what it's doing to our body. We don't like all the health problems we have. We desperately want to change, and we try over and over and over with all these diets, and we keep attempting. The biggest point of failure is the moderation thing. We have it ingrained in us, so we think we should be able to eat things in moderation. But if we look at our history, we know that there's no such thing as one. For me, one is too many, 10 is never enough.
Yeah.
If I'm perfectly fine having 0 cookies, but if I had 1 cookie, that would be it.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop at 1.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, and I mean for me what I had to do that worked is I had to take away all sweets.
Yeah.
And for me, I tried some of those keto foods,
Yeah.
and for me those were triggers kind of.
Yeah, they are. That they absolutely are for a lot of people. Are they healthier options? Are they
Mhm.
better than eating the real thing as far as like what's going to happen inside of our body? Yes. But they steal our peace because we're addicted to that sweet. It doesn't matter, and if you're, maybe it is keto brownies, but you're still eating the whole tray. That's not normal. That's not freedom. Like, and my goal was like, I wanted to get free. I wanted to be able to focus on other things in my life. And, when we're obsessed with food and that's all we can think about, everything else suffers, like all my life. It's not like I never had fun. I had lots of fun. I took vacations. I had a great, my family was great and all that, but everything had this like dark cloud over it because I was constantly enslaved by food. When we would go
Yeah.
on vacation, all I was thinking about, where are we going to eat? When are we going to eat next? And we would plan vacations around what food places are we going to go to, right? Like it's
Mhm.
just, I couldn't go to the mall. I would go to the mall and, I could be doing good. I could be in one of those times where I'm doing good. But if I go to the mall and smell Auntie Anne's, that was it. I'm
Oh,
going right to Auntie Anne's. I'm getting the pretzels. Like
yeah.
it was just, and it's everywhere. So
Yeah, it
we're
is.
bombarded with it. And, we're taught that, we should be able to have just one, and we really just can't. And that's why people continue to fail, because we keep trying to be something we're not. And when we
Mhm.
finally accept that abstinence is the answer, when we finally accept that never eating a Hershey bar again is how I'm going to stay well, and all the other countless things that I don't eat, but it's that
Yeah.
acceptance. When we reach acceptance, then we're finally free, because now I don't think about food all day. I'm living my purpose, and I'm helping other people, through the battle that I went through. And so I don't have that. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about food. I
Mhm.
don't go to bed thinking about food. I don't watch TV thinking about food, when before that was all I did. I thought about food all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it could feel like a heavy weight on your shoulder, like a little
Yeah.
devil, or
Yeah,
or just a cage, that you're stuck in. And I know,
absolutely.
like, once you feel that food freedom, it is truly freeing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And yeah, let's talk about how do you help people get through this process? Maybe walk me through like if somebody comes to you, what is the first thing that you work on?
Well, the first thing we work on is the food. So I have there's two different, I have people that come to me that are not keto at all wanting to start keto. And so, we start with a clean slate. But then I also have people that come to me that they've been keto for a while already. They're not getting the results they want. They're still struggling. They're overeating. They're addicted to sweet stuff. So I look at the food first and evaluate, like, and we talk about, like, okay, what are the things that you're eating? And inevitably, with the people who've been keto for a while that aren't getting results and are still struggling with overeating, a lot of their food log is like Rebel ice cream. Not that
Oh.
I'm not bad on Rebel; it tastes great. But like, there's Rebel ice cream, and there's like low carb protein bar, like all the keto junk food
Yeah.
is on there, or lots of like every day eating berries. And
Yeah.
so that's the first thing we do. And when we can get the food right, their brain usually calms down, and then we can address the issues. So we talk about things like, what are your patterns, what are your patterns with food, what are your danger zones. Like, a danger zone is like, what are those situations that you find yourself in where you do the thing you said you didn't want to do, you go on the binge, or you have the food that you said you were going to stay away from. So what are your
Yeah.
danger zones? And then we look at, like, what are the lies that we are believing, because we all have this voice of sabotage, and that voice of
Yeah.
sabotage is the one that, like, we're doing good on our, we're on a diet, we're on track, like, and the voice of sabotage says, oh, look, you've been so good for 2 weeks, you've lost 10 pounds, you deserve a treat. And we give into that voice. And so
Hmm.
I work with people too on overcoming that voice of sabotage, because that's really like the crux of it. Like, if we don't fight back against that voice of sabotage, we stay in the cycle. And so we go over all the things that the voice of sabotage tells us, and then we talk about, like, so what is the proper response? Instead of saying, yeah, I deserve a treat, and doing it, what should we do instead? And there's like steps that we go through, and things that we look at. We talk about it, and all the other things that affect us too. The way the relationships in our life affect the way that we eat, right? Like,
Yeah.
we've got people in our lives that we were binge buddies with, and then we
Uh-huh.
stopped doing that, and then they're kind of an influence. um,
Hmm.
you know we address all social situations. We also address, like, the obsession with numbers, people that, like, step on the scale every day, and they let it make or break their day. A lot of people are
Yeah.
obsessed with ketones and blood sugar and calories and macros and the size on their clothes. Like, that numbers obsession is all part of the disorder. So we address all of those things.
Yeah, yeah, that is really important. Yeah, and it sounds like what you have to do is just take away all that noise, I call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it could just like perpetuate like the cycle of always having to be in control,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
all that. So now what are some of the signs you think that people can like how do I know that I have a problem? How do I know that this the ice cream I eat every night is maybe a problem or maybe I'm okay.
So do you feel guilty about it? Do you have trouble controlling your portion? Do you lie to people about what you eat? Do you eat in secret? Do you hide wrappers? Like, that was behavior I used to, like, my family would be in bed, and I would eat something, or I would eat candy in the car, and then I would, like, throw the wrappers away. I'd, like, wrap the wrappers in paper towel and shove it in an empty cereal box in the trash. Like, so if you do behaviors where you're not being honest with other people about what you do because you're ashamed, you do things that you are embarrassed about, like going to the drive-through and pretending you're ordering for more than one person when really you're going to eat it all yourself.
Hmm.
um, be thinking about food all the time. Do you sit down for your first meal of the day and you're already thinking about what you're going to have at the next meal? All those things are indicative of the obsession with food.
Yes, yes, I can relate to a lot of those. Yeah, and there's for me anyway, once I did take away the noise and all that, I start to be able to see those signs like I'm hiding chocolate in
Yeah.
my closet.
Yeah.
That's maybe that's not normal.
Yeah.
you know. And so uh, so if somebody sees all those signs, where should they go? What is the first step they should take?
Well, when I work with people that work with me, I have one-on-one. I don't have a lot of one-on-one openings right now, but I work with
Yeah.
people one-on-one. And also Coach Jessica, Jessica Reynolds, her and I do a 8-week food addiction and recovery group. We usually have two going at a time, and they're like 4 weeks apart. So our next one starts the 27th of this month. It's an
Okay.
8-week group, and we address all the things that I just talked about a few minutes ago. We go through like what are the steps to being food sober for life. That's the terminology we use. Like
Oh,
I tell
okay.
people,
Oh, yeah, I love
I've
it.
been I've been food sober for over 7 years, and what that means is I don't eat sugar, I don't eat grains, I don't eat foods that harm me, I don't binge. And so that's what we want to, this 8-week group focuses on helping people get food sober, and we go through all the steps and all the things that we believe about food, what our triggers are, what our danger zones are, and we talk about how to get free from the numbers obsession, how to deal with social situations and naysayers and food pushers, and all the out, because we have noise, we have enough noise in our head from the voice of sabotage, right? But we also
Yeah.
have all that outside noise, people coming at us, social media influencers, our family members, and so we talk about how to deal with all of that. And so
Yeah.
my website is ketocoachmary.com, and that'll get you to the coaching sign up website, which is ketogeniclifestylecoaching.com.
Oh, yeah, awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a really fun, great program.
Yeah, we have a great time doing it because it's very fulfilling, and it's exciting to watch people, the light bulb go off for people, because week one of our program is always like the most satisfying because people are like blown away by hearing people talk about all the things that they thought only they dealt with.
Yeah.
So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's crazy, how many people do deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts like so young. I have a 13-year-old, and I try to help him the best way I can, but he has already recognized that he has an issue
Yeah,
with controlling himself with sugar. And we don't really have much sugar in the house, but it's there.
yeah,
Outside, and it is, and I mean, I think it's good that he recognizes that now, and we can try and work on it.
yeah.
um
It is more and more of a struggle for young people. We see more and more like overweight and obese children, children
yeah,
with type 2 diabetes. And, you know, it is, it's got to, it's just frustrating to me that it's not more obvious to people that it's the food.
yeah,
It's all this garbage food. It's Pop Tarts, it's Cocoa Pebbles, it's like all this, crap that is marketed to kids, and they start eating it young, and
yeah,
drinking sodas, and all the fruit juices, and I mean it's all just terrible, and so it is ravaging their little bodies way earlier than, and that's because there's more and more available. We have an abundance of processed garbage food,
yeah,
and that's what primarily kids eat.
yeah. And I mean, for my son anyway, we noticed the results of sugar like right away, like extreme ADHD, like just
Yeah.
just
And
yeah.
focus.
Yeah, the focus. And once we took that away, early on, he did so much better. And then you talk about, you know telling other people about that. They're like, well, he my child's on, medication or whatever, and they choose to go that route. But for us early on, we chose to go the food, route.
Yeah, I think that's why, like, there's lots of signs that, there's hope, right? But I think we're still so far away from, you know, changing things naturally, by eating the right thing. It all starts with the food, I think. And we're so far away from that being mainstream. Like, unfortunately, all the money and the clout and everything is in the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry, and that's what everybody's bombarded with, and everybody thinks that, well, that's the answer. um,
Yeah.
Anything else is just too hard.
Yeah, I know. I think it's just so, socially accepted, and there's
Yeah,
commercials. And
yeah,
that's always the thing that we get, like, my son, like, oh, he sees something on TV. And he's like, "Oh, I want that." I'm like, "Well, that's not good for you. We're not going to have that."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it may look great on TV, but it's not great for our bodies.
Yeah. They come
Um,
up with some very crazy, like, I mean, it would when I was a kid, there was one kind of Oreo, and now there's like 20
oh my
kinds of
God.
Oreos.
Oh my gosh. It's horrible. I know. It's
Yeah.
horrible. Yeah. Um, well, it's been so amazing talking to you, Mary. Um,
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
yeah, of course. And your story was in the dietitian's dilemma, and that's how I
Yes.
first kind of saw you. I saw you in
Okay.
there, um,
Yes.
and it's so inspiring and
Thank
something,
you.
yeah, something that we all need to, I think, talk about is the food addiction
Yeah,
piece.
I think it definitely needs to be talked about more. And especially like when people are pushing back and, when someone says it's not real, that
Hmm.
steals hope from somebody and, can keep them sicker longer because they're buying into that their problem isn't real or serious.
I know, and when you're in your body, you know it's real, right? You know
That's
you're
right.
trapped. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and in closing, like, what is the big message that you want to tell everybody?
I, you know, I mostly like this. I talk about this all the time. It's never too late to get free. Like, it doesn't matter if you're, 40, 50, 60, so many people seem to think that because they're older, that it's too late for them. It's never too late. And even if you feel hopeless and trapped and like you'll never get free, you can get free. There is freedom.
Yes, I completely agree. Yes. And so, where can everyone find you? I mean, I will make sure I put some of your links in the description show notes.
Okay. My website is ketocoachmary.com and I'm Keto Mary 71 on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, awesome. So I will leave all that in the show notes.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Yes. Bye, Mary.
Bye.